visitors from elsewhere. Great to see a full house, so thank you for coming. Secondly, you may notice at the back there's a guy called Chris Lewis who's going to be taking photographs during the service and afterwards. He's not a spy. He's not from the Daily Mirror or the Sun. He is one of us. He's from Christchurch. And the reason he's here is because we want to upgrade our website and have more photographs of what goes on in the Cockermouth area team. So Chris, who actually is a professional photographer, has kindly donated his services free to take photographs on occasions such as this to include on the website. So if you find yourself being snapped afterwards, I hope that's okay, and you might find yourself on the website in a few days' time. So I thought I'd just explain that. I know it seems like you're getting two sermons this morning, but they are a bit different. Anne has very helpfully, I think, set the context as we've reflected on Jesus' ministry and how, in many ways, we continue the work that he has begun. So let's just pause for a moment to pray as we ask that God will open our minds to the new things to which he always is leading us. Lord, as we've heard this morning of your being inconvenienced and your transforming the lives of others, so we pray that we may be always ready to follow where you lead into your future, and help us this morning to reflect on these things. In your name. Amen. Well, it's 12 months since Les and I arrived in Cockermouth, much to our surprise, because we thought we would finish our ministry in Liverpool as we began. And then this happened completely out of the blue, as most of you will know by now. And I realised within a week of starting this new work that things were going to be a bit different. I was doing a baptism visit in Broughton, and got lost. I couldn't find the house I was looking for. Eventually got there, but was late, and the visit went fine. And the following week, it just so happened I had another baptism visit to do in exactly the same road. This time, I found the house more easily. So I said to the people I was visiting on the second Sunday, I said, well, I found you a lot more easily than last week. It took me a while last week to find the house. And she said, yes, I know. And from there you went to see Mary, then you went to see Sue. That wouldn't have happened in Liverpool, but I realised, as I'd been told, be careful, Godfrey, because every move you make, someone will know. And that's turned out to be true on a few occasions. So what I want to begin by doing this morning is just telling you about 4 things I have learned since being in Cockermouth. And they're all positives, all good things about us being church in this marvellous part of the world. And we really are seeing this area in all its glory and its beauty at the moment, aren't we? It's a fabulous morning. The first thing I've learned is that church matters. And I've been coming back to that a few times because it's something that struck me very forcibly since being here. And for years I've been saying to Christian friends and to churches, you do not realise how important you are, both in terms of God's economy and in terms of the transformation of the world in a Godward direction. Why do I say that particularly here? Well, you just have to read the Times and Star to realise that church matters. It would be an interesting exercise every week to go through and see how many times there is a mention somewhere, somehow, of church. It's on several pages. And it's, to me, a most interesting experience and a most unusual one to find that church makes the news in so many different ways. And the letters page often contains letters written by local Christians with a particular point of view. And then when we've been talking about the future of our churches, and particularly of All Saints, where there's been some doubt about the future, I found lots of townsfolk really interested in the future of that particular church, even if they don't attend it regularly themselves. It matters to them. And we still have lots of baptisms, weddings and funerals in all of our churches. I did a count a few days ago of how many funerals I've done since I've been here in 12 months. It was nearly 40. And that's just me. That doesn't include Adrian and John and Wendy and Ken and others who've also done funerals. Just over nearly 40 just by me. You realise church matters. Then again, we find ourselves welcome into all of our different schools in different ways at different times. Teachers, head teachers particularly, are glad to see us. And then, of course, there was the flood, where again we saw churches, particularly churches together, at the forefront of the flood relief, and continuing even now, nearly 6 months later, to support families and individuals who were affected. So church matters. That's the first thing I've learned and the most important, and I'll return to that later. Secondly, I want to say that we are well served by you, by many others. I'm incredibly grateful that in all 4 of our churches there are a number of people who carry out faithfully various responsibilities, and in some cases have done for many years. So I want to say a big thank you to all of you who are office holders and leaders and just help to keep our churches thriving and flourishing. The third thing I've learned is that we're good at hospitality. Coffee and cake. Lots of it. Any excuse. And I'm quite grateful for that. But it's also, of course, a very important aspect of Christian ministry, because it's what Jesus did. So much of his teaching and his encounters happened around a meal table. So if we're good at hospitality, it means we're going to be good at meeting people, including those who aren't necessarily part of our churches. And the fourth thing I've learned is that we have a vision. And when I say we, I don't just mean our 4 churches, and I don't even just mean churches together in Cockermouth. I'm referring to our whole county and this ecumenical vision that is being worked out. And as some of you know, I've been asked since I've been here not just to lead the Cockermouth area team, but also to help to bring into being one of these new mission communities, which I hope by now you'll have heard about, even if, like me, you're not quite sure what that means. But we're working on it. So 4 real positives here about Cockermouth itself and about our place as churches within this neighbourhood. But my question is, how can we be more effective in bringing good news in this confusing and sometimes fearful world? Because although we're a full church this morning, that's exceptional, and we're all too aware, aren't we, that there aren't that many of us. We're also aware of the age profile, which doesn't give us huge confidence for the future if we allow ourselves to be preoccupied with that. So, what about going forward? I don't know if you are readers of the Daily Telegraph, but there was an interesting article there yesterday which I caught up with on the internet. There's been a new survey published to show that for the first time, apparently, in the UK, there are now more people who say they are not Christians than who say they are. Don't know how they've reached that conclusion, but that is the result of a latest survey. By the way, there's another survey that says if you're a woman who goes to church, you're likely to live 5 months longer. So just throw that in for your encouragement. 5 months extra. Heaven will have to wait, ladies, I'm sorry. If you go to church, you're going to live 5 months longer. So how did the Daily Telegraph writer respond to this news that there are now more people who say there aren't Christians than who say they are? The writer says this: imagine that the Anglican Church was like Tesco's. If Tesco stopped advertising, people would stop shopping there. If Tesco constantly banged on about how its own products are old-fashioned and in need of updating, people would stop shopping there. If Tesco said it would be nice to see you if you'd visit once in a while, but we entirely understand why you don't, people would stop shopping there. Christians have become their own worst enemy, the writer said, killing their faith with silence. What an expression that is. Killing our faith with silence. And he goes on like this. Advertise. Speak up. Tell people about your beliefs. At the centre of the faith is the truth that Jesus died and rose from death to herald a new era. The power of the good news is so great it cannot fail to win converts. Time to share it. Do you agree with that? Yeah. Good. So, it is time to wake up, friends, because if we don't, if we have a spirit of timidity rather than one of courage and hope, then there's only going to be a one-way street as far as church is concerned. So, how are we going to do this? What are the signs of hope that we might work through here in the Cockermouth area team? Well, some of you will be familiar by now with this model of a cartwheel, whereby we're saying that each of our 4 churches is like the community on the rim of a wheel. It's where the rubber hits the road, that's where the energy is, that's where we need to place our resources. And the hub, and this morning is an expression of hub, when we come together, our business is to encourage and strengthen and enable each other where the rubber hits the road. I believe very much in what I call communities of blessing. And that's what I hope we might begin to think of as a description of church. Church means lots of different things to different people. But if we start to think of our own church, your church, whichever one you normally attend, as a community of blessing, we begin to understand what we're here for and what we're about. The early church believed themselves to be a community. They shared life, they shared property, they shared everything. And if you know your church history, you may know that in the first millennium, it was through Celtic communities, monastic communities, shared lives, that this nation was evangelized. And it's no exaggeration to say that had it not been for those communities of blessing, we would all, in all probability, not be here this morning. It's really important that we move away from this sense of an institutional church that's trying to keep the show on the road, as Anne was saying earlier, to a sense of being community. And Jean Vanier says this, that the love that we share in community means moving towards each other and above all moving together in the same direction. Moving towards each other and moving as one body, that is, in the same direction. One of the things that concerns me about many churches today, and I'm not just speaking about ours, is there are too many agendas. People have their own particular thing that they like to do, and they make jolly sure it still happens regardless of whether it's something that maybe has run out of steam or should have been closed down years ago. But if we have that sense of community, of moving forward together, we're more likely to have an impact on the areas which we serve. And he goes on to say we have 2 poles of community, a sense of belonging to each other and a desire that each of us goes further in our own gift to God and to others. In other words, we need to help each other to grow in our faith and in our gifting. Now, one of the ways we're going to try to develop that over the next few months is in this way: sharing God's blessing. That's the phrase I'd like you to take away with you today. I've pinched it from a book by a guy called Robin Greenwood. And what we're hoping to do over the next few months is ask each church to reflect by means of what we're going to call shared conversations about how we can share God's blessing in our own neighbourhood and community. And you see the difference here. It's not about keeping the show on the road. It's not facing inwards, clinging on for dear life to all the things that we've always done because we're terrified about what might happen if we don't. But turning ourselves round, seeing ourselves as a community of blessing here for our village and for our town. And thinking all the time, how can we bless our neighbourhood? What has God put into our hearts that we can turn into good practice for those around us? What are the blessings with which we have been endowed, and how may we share them? So over these next few months, each of our 4 churches, you'll be hearing more about that and how these conversations can happen. Each of them will be guided by what's called a companion, who will be someone you probably know, but not a member of your own church, so that they have a bit of distance to help you reflect on these things. But the next thing to say is about the importance of prayer. Who can tell me, please, what is our Bible verse for this year? Fantastic. Thank you. How many of you are sitting there with a welcome sheet in front of you? It's at the bottom of the page. Ask and it shall be given you, seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be opened unto you. Let me just tell you a story which is so exciting. I think most of you are aware that in the week leading up to Pentecost we were devoting ourselves to prayer for our nation, for our neighbourhood, for people to come to know the love of Christ. On the Thursday of that week, some of us went on a prayer walk around town and around the villages as well. And we stopped in different key places to pray that God's blessing would rest upon that place and upon those people. One of the first places we stopped at was Fairfield School next to Christchurch, where for various reasons we haven't had an entrance for quite some time as churches. It's just kind of fallen into abeyance. As we arrived at the gate, up the road came one of the teachers. Not just any teacher, but the very teacher whose baby was being christened by Adrian a couple of weeks later. So a conversation happened. He wondered what we were doing, and probably looked a bit suspicious. And we told him, and he was immediately engaging with us and said, yes, we would like you to come into the school more often. And after he'd gone back to work, we stood and prayed for a few minutes about various aspects, particularly that the door that we sensed was only ajar would be opened to us. And I tell you, within a fortnight, that's exactly what happened. Because on Tuesday, as some of you will know, Helen Folds is running a fun day at Christchurch. One of the people who's helping her with that has a connection into the school. She told the school said, Helen, come and speak to our assembly about the fun day that you're running at Christchurch. So a door has opened. That's not a coincidence. That's a God incidence. Ask, seek, knock, pray, things happen. Had that man in the gospel story not asked Jesus, then his slave would not have been healed. It's very simple. And yet how often we fail to do the obvious thing. So I want to encourage you, particularly in prayer. And I've put on the screen there a reminder about the gatherings, which is where we come together for prayer. And please note that for the next one, we have Bishop Robert coming on the 15th of June here in this very place. You really want to be here for that. There will be cake, there will be coffee, there will be God for all. Actually, I haven't asked about the cake. Is that all right, Brightcirk? I just realised I made a big assumption. But usually there is. So I want to draw to a conclusion in a rather more personal way. I've said a few times now that church matters, that being a community of blessing offers us a model as to how we can reach our neighbourhoods with the good news of Jesus. Friends, church matters not just to us, not just to our neighbourhood, but church matters most of all to the Lord our God. Why do I say that? Because now, in this generation, as in every other, the only way that God has of reaching the world with the good news of his love is the church. There is no other way that God is going to bring people to the knowledge of himself unless the church does what it's called to do, what we are called to do. We've heard from Anne's Bible reflection that we need to be willing to be inconvenienced, to set aside the agenda or our set way of doing things in order to follow the Spirit. And we were reminded last week that we are called to be part of the dynamic of the Holy Trinity in bringing others into that communion. So let me just share something with you personally. Over the last few weeks, I've been studying the Song of Solomon in the Bible, which is not a book one tends to look at terribly often, not least because you're not quite sure what to make of all the erotic language and what on earth that means for us in our Christian journey. But a few weeks back, just after I started to study that book, I woke up one morning and I heard these words very distinctly in my mind. And the words were, "Let me love you. Let me love you." And I felt very deeply that God was speaking to my heart. And as I've continued to work my way through that book, I have to say I've fallen more and more in love with Jesus again. You see, I am by nature, as you may have noticed, a bit of a striver and a bit of a fixer. I like to make, you're laughing at, I like to make things happen, I like to put things right, I like to make things work. But I can't always, and neither can you. And I've been learning from the Lord that actually, although of course action is necessary, the most important thing is that I know myself to be loved. Because I can't earn God's love, and neither can you. But I can receive it, and the more I receive of God's love, the more I have to share of God's love. Again, it's very simple. Because let's face it, the world is in a mess, and sometimes, frankly, our lives are in a mess as well. We want to fix things, but they won't get fixed. I'd like you now to watch a video, just a short one, about God's masterpiece and the work he can do, particularly in our personal lives. But I think this could also be a good picture of what God is doing in the world.
I've heard. You've heard. It's time for a new beginning. Time to start a fresh page or paint a new picture of our life. Sounds great and clear, but it can seem impossible. Life is messy. The lines have gotten blurred. Maybe we just don't know where to start. We look at the canvas of our lives and see mistake after mistake after mistake. It's overwhelming. When I look at my life, these messy lines and scribbles, it makes me think, is this as good as it gets? There's no eraser that can make this life make sense. But what if? What if there was someone that could make sense of our mess? They could take all our scribbles, all our mistakes, all our missed opportunities, and make them into a masterpiece. And I remember, there is Jesus. He gives us a new life. Every day is new. Every day is a blank canvas full of possibility and promise. He takes our canvas, our lives that have been filled up with shortcomings, secrets, tragedies, and embarrassment, and he helps them make sense. When I look at the canvas of my life and I see nothing but disorder and chaos, I have to remember this. God is not a God of disorder. He's a God of peace. And you know what? He wants to take my hand and bring peace to the canvas of my life. We seek to make our mark. Let us give God all our scribbles, all our mistakes, all our hurts, and trust that he will turn our messy lives into a masterpiece. His masterpiece.
God is making a masterpiece in your life, in my life, in the world. And I hope that gives you hope as we share in what God is doing. Just one more thing. These are some words I've been repeating regularly over the past 12 months because we really need to be in the perspective of eternity. A few days ago, someone was heard to say, "I don't feel very confident about the future of my church, but as long as it sees me out, that's okay." It isn't okay, because if we all took that view, there will be no church in that particular place. There'll still be church, because God wants it to be so, but churches die if they're seen to be just there for those who regularly go to it. But if we see ourselves as communities of blessing here, not for ourselves, but for our towns, our villages, to be part of the masterpiece God is making in the world, that will change our whole perspective. Friends, we really need to work on the canvas of eternity. We need to build for the future we shall not see. Let's pray. Lord, by your Spirit, please be at work to make us a masterpiece, that we may bring blessing to this broken world. Teach us that our true glory lies not in our achievements, but in your character being formed in us. Bind us together, we pray, in communities of blessing, that the world may see that we are your disciples and that you call everyone to follow you. For your name's sake. Amen.
Amen.